Hi there, you're very welcome. Thanks for joining me. My name is Arran Murphy. I'm the Programme Manager here in Rediscover Fashion. We're based in the Rediscovery Centre in Ballymun, which is the National Centre for Circular Economy. And as part of National Reuse Month, I'm going to show you how to make a face mask from an old shirt. So because of COVID-19, at the moment we're all using a lot of face masks to keep safe. This is unfortunately creating its own waste problem, so that's why I'm going to show you today how to make your own face mask that can be reused and washed, and even better, we're going to make it by reusing an old shirt. And you can do this with any kind of old item of clothing or textile from your household, like bed linen or something like that. Generally cotton or polycotton is a good fabric to use, so if you have anything made of those fabrics, then you can use that for this project. So what you'll need for this project is your fabric, scissors, needle and thread and some pins. You'll also need some elastic, or if you don't have elastic you can use t-shirt yarn, which I'll show you how to make because it has a little bit of stretch in it, so you can use that if you don't have elastic. So you don't need to go to the shops to do this project. You'll also need an A4 sheet of paper, which is what we're going to use for the template to cut out the fabric for our mask. So we'll get going. So first of all, I'm going to show you the type of mask that we're going to make. So there are lots of different mask styles around these days. The one we're going to make today is a very simple one that we can do just by hand sewing, so we don't need a sewing machine to do this. It has one pleat, one fold in the center, and it has an opening on the inside so that you can put a filter in there. So we use our A4 sheet of paper as a template, and what I'm going to do is cut a single rectangle out. This is a great shirt because it was very, very big. I already used the bottom half of it for another upcycling project. So we're going to pin it into place, and I'm going to use the pattern on this, so it has stripes on it that I'm going to use as my lines to line it up. I'm going to put some pins in. You want the template to be sitting flat on the fabric. Put your pins in every 4 to 5 inches roughly, so that the paper stays close to the fabric when you're cutting it. Then your scissors. If you're used to doing sewing projects, you'll know that it's important to keep a fabric cutting scissors separate to your normal scissors so that it's used only for cutting fabric, and this is because it will go blunt if you're using it to cut paper. So I'm going to cut around right on the line of the paper, so you're getting the exact shape of the paper. You can trim that, neaten it up if you need to. I'm going to just trim the corner here. And then you can take your pins out, take your paper off. It's handy to have a template. If you're going to be making a few of these, you can just place it down on the fabric. So there's my rectangle. So I'm going to fold this in half so that the edges are meeting there. And this is going to be our first line of stitching, just along here. So we're going to stitch at roughly 1 centimetre from the edge. We have a 1 centimetre seam allowance. You can do this on the sewing machine as well. It will be a bit quicker, but it's fine to do it by hand as well. So I have that pinned. Then I'm going to get my needle and thread my needle up. So I'm using very bright thread so that you'll be able to see my stitches. But generally for a sewing project, you would be trying to match the thread as closely as possible so that it's as invisible as possible. So we're going to sew with a double thread, tie a knot at the bottom, and if you need to, you can measure and mark at 1 centimetre along the line that you want to sew, just to keep it straight. So I'm just going to mark at 1 centimetre just so you can see how I'm going to do that. Just from the edge here. I'm going to do this with a pen. You can do it with a pencil, with tailor's chalk if you have it, or else sometimes when I'm doing marking on fabric I will use a colouring pencil actually, because that will come off in the wash. So I'm just going to start my line of stitching. I find that if I stitch with the smaller amount of fabric towards me, I find it easier. So I'm going to start here. Now the type of stitch that you will do, there's two options. You can do a simple running stitch, which is just an in and out stitch all the way along. But if you wanted to make it a bit more sturdy and long lasting, you can use a back stitch. So I'll show you how you do the back stitch. And just a little tip for hand sewing, it's a good idea not to make the thread too long, because you can get tied up in knots really easily if it's too long. You want your stitches to be about 1/2 centimetre long. And to do the back stitch, on the underneath you're doing a stitch that's 1 centimetre long, and then you're coming back 1/2 centimetre to meet the last stitch. So we're not going to sew a continuous line across here because we want to leave an opening to put the filter in. So the way that we measure that is if you fold your piece in half and measure 4 centimetres from the centre fold here, and you can mark that with a pin, or you can use the scissors just to put a little snip, like only a few millimetres, just so you can mark it. Just make sure that it goes through both layers. Like that. So then you know how far to stitch. Now when you're finishing your line of hand stitching, we always do 3 stitches in the same place to secure it. So 3 stitches over each other like this. That's like doing a back stitch on a sewing machine. Now there's my back stitching. For the next side I'll just use the running stitch so I can give an example of that. The running stitch is faster to do, but the back stitch is more secure. And the running stitch, you go in and out, and you can actually gather a few stitches onto your needle at the same time, so it's quite fast. So I've gathered quite a few stitches there, if you can see. And again, to secure the line of stitching, do 3 stitches in the same place. 1, 2, and 3. And you can cut the thread right at the stitch line. There. So take out your pins, and now we're going to maneuver this stitch line to the center of the fabric. So first of all, before we do that, I'm going to do a little mark, this center point, this fold here. That will help us keep everything in line. I'm going to match up the line of stitching with that little mark. That side and on that side. Then we're going to press this seam open. So for all of you who don't really like ironing, unfortunately, as I discovered, ironing is a central part of sewing. It's a different kind of ironing. You're not ironing to get the creases out, you're ironing to help the fibres of the fabric sit in the right place, the right direction. So there we go. And now at this point we want to add in either our elastic or our t-shirt yarn. So I'm going to show you how to make the t-shirt yarn. I'm going to cut a strip of t-shirt. This is the black t-shirt that I've used. I actually made this mask from this t-shirt, so you can use t-shirts for the masks as well. The strip is going to be about 2 centimeters wide. So I'm just doing that by eye. You want to keep it, the width of it, as uniform as possible. The strip is 35 centimeters. So I'm going to cut that in 2. So each loop is going to be roughly 17 and a half centimeters. So there we go, line that up. Cut it in 2. And the trick with making t-shirt yarn is once you have your strip cut, you need to stretch it out a little bit, and it makes the t-shirt curl. So it's not a flat loop, flat strip anymore. It's kind of more comfortable that way. Okay, so we're going to put this on the inside, up at the corner at the fold. I'm going to pin that into place. And the other end at the other, be a little tricky to get it into the right place, but you can do it. Once you have it in the right place, you can pin it. So now we're going to sew a 1 centimeter seam allowance along here and along here. So I'm just going to sew this line of stitching. You want to reinforce where your loop is, so you're going to do a couple of stitches over each other where the loop is, just to reinforce it. I'm going to do 3 stitches here. And then you can continue the line of stitching either using the back stitch or the running stitch. And again, at the end where your loop is, I'm going to do reinforcing stitches here. Then the same on the other side. There's my 2 lines of stitching either side, complete. I'm going to take out the pins and we're going to be turning it the other way around. But first of all, I want to trim the corners. So be very careful that you don't cut your line of stitching, but I'm going to trim the corners so that it isn't too bulky when we turn it the right way around. And then we can use the opening to pull it the right way around. We have our loops attached. So we're nearly there. We can iron this, press it flat, and we can do our pleat now. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to be looking at the back of the mask. So the front of the mask is facing the table, and roughly halfway between the opening, the seam here, we're going to fold it and pull it down towards the seam so that it matches the seam, and pin it into place. And then again on the other side we'll do the same. So roughly halfway between the seam and the edge of the mask, fold it and bring it to meet the seam. Now we're going to stitch this into place by stitching the whole way along here. We can also do a top stitch along the top and bottom of the mask, and that will help it keep its shape. Alternatively, every time you wash it, you can just give it a quick iron and that will get it back into its shape. So this line of stitching will be visible, so you can bring a little bit of design in here. You can choose a contrasting thread, or you can try out a decorative stitch. Like on this one I did a little kind of star-shaped stitch to hold the pleat in place. So I'm going to start this line of stitching kind of inside the seam. So I'm going to try and hide the knot inside the seam. As you're sewing the thicker fabric, so more and more layers of the fabric, it can get more difficult to get the needle through. This is where an old style thimble would come in handy. So the most important thing here is that you're catching the pleat in place. So I'm securing my line of stitching with 3 stitches over each other. And there we have our mask. So this is a lovely project to use your creativity to create your own face mask. You're reusing old clothing or textiles from your house, and your face mask is also reusable, so you're doing great things altogether. So if you'd like to know more about reuse and repair, please visit mywaste.ie. Reuse Month is a great initiative, and it's a great thing to engage with. So thanks for joining me. Bye.